I want to express my gratitude for Costa Mesa Community Church. It went on to become The Crossing, and I think has expanded from there, but at its earlier stage, when it was Costa Mesa Community Church, I was blessed to walk into a sermon that changed my life. Pastor Tim Celek. I never got to know him, but I have never forgotten that sermon that spoke to me and helped me complete that turn to Christ, or at least take that step towards Christ. And I just want it to be known that whenever I challenge my Protestant brothers and sisters, whenever I challenge those doctrines, I have love. I have love for my separated brethren, because that's where I began to take ownership of this journey. And I guess in some offering of this appreciation, I want to introduce that sermon from Pastor Tim Celek that I am grateful that I purchased the recording of it after I heard it and was so moved by it. So God bless Pastor Tim Celek. God bless Patrick Decken, my first Christian mentor, whom I will always be grateful for, appreciate, love, and respect, and pray for. And though we may disagree, let us pray for one another, and let us encourage each other to finish the race in Christ. Abide the fire.
Lines with me right now. Appreciate that. As we continue this series we've been called Life Together, we've been sort of trying to unpack or unwrap God's heart of what it can be like if human beings like you and like me really do life together. Togetherness, though, is not a concept that is really preferred here in our world. It really isn't. See, we live in the day and age of the gated community. We live in the day and age of the garage door opener. We live in the day and age of voicemail, the day and age of when somebody knocks at your door, you're sort of suspect, so you don't open your door. In fact, you turn all your lights off and go and run and hide. We just live in that sort of day where these days we push people out and we live life solo. We live in the day and age of my rights. Not your rights, my rights. We don't live in a time period anymore where we defer to others. Forget that. If they stumble and fall, we walk on their back, on our way to where it is we want to get to. Now, all of that we wouldn't just readily admit. because then it wouldn't be cool. But that's the way life is lived here in this world. And yet we've been in a series where we've looked at what it means to love each other as Jesus has loved us. We're to love other human beings regardless of gender or socioeconomic status or ethnic background, age. We're to love each other as Jesus has loved us. Not with Tim kind of love or your kind of love, but with Jesus' love. We've been looking at that through this whole series. Well, today, I think you, if you aren't, I have been. I mean, like way off the map challenge is what it is I want to discuss with you. In fact, I was going to put this earlier in the series, but I've been sort of conflicted over the seriousness of this thought and issue that I had to work it through in my own mind before I felt like I could sort of, discuss it with you. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at two types of people. One person we readily know about, or at least we know his name, and that is Jesus, the Christ. We're going to look at him and his life over and above another person that some of you here have known about or heard about or you know bits and pieces of, and that is a man named Peter, okay? Peter. Now, for some of you who are sort of new to the Bible or new to church, and if that's the case, I'm glad you're here. Peter was one of the 12 followers of Jesus. In fact, Peter was one of the 3 who was really in the inner circle of the best friends of Jesus Christ. This guy, Peter, literally ate, slept, drank, lived alongside of Jesus for 3 years. I mean, it was an intense time of training for this guy named Peter. And during those 3 years, Peter learned a whole bunch of lessons of one very essential, one very core concept. Probably the foundational concept when it comes to the message of Jesus. And he kept seeing this in the way that Jesus taught or the way that Jesus demonstrated. He kept seeing Jesus living or teaching this in his lifestyle, this concept. And the whole concept was the concept of service or serving or servanthood. And what I want to do here today is I want to share with you 2 primary lessons. And the lesson number 1 is this. Let's just get into it. Go ahead and write it down. Lesson number 1 that Peter learned and that you and I will need to learn. Lesson number 1 about service or servanthood or serving is stop giving lip service. Stop giving lip service. How many of you in here, just so I sort of know, how many of you in here, my dad used to use that phrase all the time. How many of you in here have ever heard that phrase, lip service, okay? Good. Lip service, you know sort of what it is. It's nothing more than saying, oh yeah, I'll serve, I'll do it. Don't worry, Mom, I'll take the trash out. 20 minutes later, taking it out yet? No, but don't worry. At the commercial, I'll do it. Commercial comes around, show's over. You taking the trash out? No, but don't worry. Before I go to bed, I'll do it. I'll get around to it. And so it's sort of like, I'll do it, but you never do it, or I'll do it, but you sort of push the parameters, procrastinate, and you do it on your time schedule. I promise I'll do it, but you never get around to it. Now, I want you to look at what Jesus has to say about this topic. And we're going to look at this passage on your outline in Matthew chapter 21, verse 28. Now, this is a story that Jesus told. And in the Bible, these sort of stories were told as parables. That's what they were called, parables. But you need to understand who Jesus is telling this parable to, because it really sets the context. Jesus is telling this story to people like you and people like me. He's telling this story to church-going people. He's telling this story to the religious people of his day. In fact, look at it there in your outline. Jesus said, "But what do you think about this?" Now remember, he's talking to church-going people, religious people. What do you think about this? A man with 2 sons told the older boys, "Son, go out and work in the vineyard today." The son answered, "No, I won't go." But later, he changed his mind and he went anyway. Then the father told the other of the sons, "You go." And he said, "Yes, sir, I will." But he didn't go. So Jesus asked those religious church-going people, which of the two was obeying his father? Okay, now, let's just stop right there. Let's pretend you're on the countryside, Jesus is telling you this story. And he gets down and he asks you, you're sitting in the audience, and he says, "Hey, which of the two obeyed the dad?" Is it the first son who said no, but later changed his mind and went anyway? Or is it the other son who said, "Oh, yes, yeah, I'll go," but he never showed up? Well, the first son did what the father wanted. In fact, I don't know about you, but if you're anything like me, and I would imagine that most of you here aren't because you're not that whacked, okay? But if any of you are like me, then sometimes I think there's been opportunities in your life where you've been prompted to serve, either by like a boss or a coworker or a family member or one of your children, a friend. You've been prompted to serve. It might have been somebody here at the church. You've been prompted to serve. Or maybe it was just not in any of those categories. You just in your heart, you felt this tug. You were prompted to serve. And when you were prompted to serve in one of those settings, your first inkling inside your gut was, "No way, I'm not doing that. You got to be kidding me. That's below me. Now, if you ask me to do this, I'll do this, but I'm not doing that. Come on, get those kind of people to do that. They can do it." Or you think to yourself when somebody prompts you to serve, do it yourself. You got 2 arms and legs, go do it. Have you ever been there? Okay? See, some of you in here are sort of like me, man, maybe, like this first son. "No, I'm not going to do it, Or maybe you're like the second son. Maybe you're like that second son when any time you're prompted to serve. Like you're here at church and somebody gets up and says, "Hey, will you serve in the children's area? We need people to serve in the children's area." And you're so overwhelmed with emotion. You put your name on the little card, check a box, and then the person starts calling you and calling you. And calling you. And pretty soon, you just hope that person just leaves somehow. Because now you're embarrassed because you're just, why did I even check that box to begin with? "Oh yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. You can count on me." But you never get around to it. See, now the question is, Jesus gets on telling this story, and the question he asked them is basically, which one do you think I am most impressed with? Which one do you think is the one that obeyed the dad? Which one? First one, yeah, the first one. See, no matter what it was he verbalized, he ended up serving anyway. It's as if Jesus is saying, lip service is not allowed. That's what he's saying. It's not appropriate. In fact, here's what I want you to do, see. I want you to look at how this story ends up. Now, you've heard that old colloquial, like, hit upside the head by a 2x4 or shot between the eyes. I want you to look at how this story ends up. Now, remember, he's talking to people like us who go to church. He's talking to religious kind of people. Look what he says here at the end. Look at this. Which of the two was obeying his father? They replied, "The first, of course." Then Jesus explained his meaning. "I assure you, corrupt tax collectors and prostitutes will get into the kingdom of God before you do." Ouch. Whoa. What is that? He says, "You see those tax collectors over there? They're walking by the street." Which, by the way, they were the lowliest scum of the earth people back then. Not a lot has changed, has it? And then he says, "You see those people, prostitutes walking the streets? They're going to be allowed into the kingdom of God before you people." will. And all those people like you are going, what? And Jesus going, yeah, that's right. They will. And like you're saying in your mind now, like those people were saying then, why? Because Jesus says, you see, when they come in contact with me, their life is so radically altered and redirected, they will do whatever I ask them to do. You just say you will do it, but you don't. You walk around saying, I'm a Christian. Oh, I believe in Jesus. Looking good, you know? Coming to church on the weekend, stuff like that. Lip service says, I'll serve you, Jesus, but you never really get around to it. It's like, you know, we walk around all the time saying we want to reach our community for Jesus. But I wonder, how often do any of you in here ever share the good news of Jesus Christ with somebody else in your neighborhood? We talk all the time about being available to people in our community so that we can love them as Jesus loved them. But how much time is allotted in your day timer for people in your community? I mean, how often really? See, Jesus is saying that the church-going world, the religious world, is full of people who are saying, I'll do it, I'll do it, oh, I'll do it. They never get around to it. And what he's saying there is for true followers of mine, that's not good enough to say, I'll do it. He's saying, stop giving lip service. Now, lesson number 2, if lesson number 1 isn't enough, some of you are going, why did I even come to church today? You know? Well, now you see why I've sort of backed this up in this series. I've been wrestling with this. Lesson number 2, as Jesus tries to cement this whole concept of serving or servanthood or service even further, lesson number 2, I'll give you the point and then I'll try to explain it because some of you will think I'm really messed up. Lesson number 2 is start living strip service. Stop giving lip service is lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is start living strip service. Now, I'm going to explain that, okay? I'm going to explain that. Don't worry, I will explain it. Philippians 2. Philippians 2. Look what it says here. Philippians 2 on your outline. This is it. It says our attitude should be the same as that of Jesus Christ. Our attitude. That means that if you are a Christian, if you are in this room today and you identify yourself as a believer of Jesus, then your attitude at all times should be that of Christ Jesus. Look what it says there. Who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing. Circle those words. Made himself nothing. Taking the very nature of a servant. Circle the word servant. Being made in human likeness. That's key. Circle the word human likeness. Who being in the very nature God, made himself nothing, being made in the nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in the appearance as a man, he humbled, circle that word, humbled himself and became obedient to death, even death on the cross. Unfortunately, a lot of times I think we read the Bible, but we sort of fast forward and we don't really catch the intent of the writer. He's saying here is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. This is the top banana. This is the big cheese. This is the head kahuna, okay? This is the top dog of the whole entire universe. And one day, he steps down from his position of power, his position of absolute authority, and is born as a baby in a manger in a stable. He stripped himself willingly of his rightful claim to glory, of his rightful claim to position, of his rightful claim to authority. He stripped himself so that he might come and serve humans. And what is so powerful to me is in John chapter 13, we have a wonderful picture And we just briefly, a couple weeks ago, talked about this. And what I want to do this morning is look at this more in depth today, okay? John chapter 13, Jesus is teaching what it is he did by way of a powerful illustration. And he was the real life illustration. Look here at it, John 13, verse 1. Look at it in your outline. It says, before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. Now just stop right there. Jesus, you got to remember, was living on a heavenly timetable, okay? He's aware of the fact that he's got very little time left. In fact, if you know the story, within 24 hours, Jesus would find himself literally hanging on a cross. Now, these men didn't know that, who were there celebrating that Last Supper together as friends. They didn't know that. But Jesus did. So this is the last day of his life. In fact, I already asked you the question a little bit earlier this morning. I want to ask it again. You can write it down. If you only have 24 hours to live, just write it down. What would I do with those 24 hours? Okay? If I only had 24 hours to live, that's what Jesus, right now, we're seeing displayed. If I only had 24 hours to live, what would I do with those 24 hours? And Jesus is going to display that for us right now. What would you do if you only had 24 hours to live? Some of you go, oh man, I'd go to Blockbuster movies and I'd rent movies and watch them till I was sick, you know? 24 hours of Star Wars, you know? Some of you would say, I'd play golf the whole 24 hours. Some of you here, because you think this would be the correct answer, you'd say, I'd study the Bible all 24 hours. Some of you here would say, I'd spend time with people. Others of you here would probably say, well, I'd set up shop on the street corner and tell everybody about the good news of Jesus Christ. If I only had 24 hours to live. But be honest, if you only knew you had 24 hours to live, what would you do? Well, we get to get a little inside glimpse. See, Jesus knew he only had 24 hours to live, and we get to see what he did with that. Look at it here. It's interesting. It says, before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He now showed the disciples the full extent of his love. Now, that's a key thing, because this is at the end of his life. It says he now showed the disciples the full extent. That's crucial, the full extent he's now displaying to these friends. He's been with them for 3 years. Now he's explaining to them the full extent of his love. It was time for supper. Look at it there. So he got up from the table, took off his robe, and wrapped a towel around his waist. Now just stop right there. Some of you, when you get out of the shower, in fact, how many of you in here have ever taken a shower? Good. Just making sure. See, some of you, when you get out of the shower, I'm not going to go this personal here, but when you get out of the shower, some of you will wrap a towel around your waist or around yourself. But how many of you would go out in public or to work like that? To a social setting like that? See, this is a pretty humbling thing that Jesus is doing here. We so quickly dismiss what we read in the Bible. We fast forward right through it. We don't catch the full weight of what's going on. And some of it's because we are such a video-oriented society. We don't have the videotape of this to replay to sort of get the nuances. Jesus right here is in front of his followers, his friends, and he disrobes. He stripped himself of all the outer garments that might hinder him from serving. And I don't have the ones that they used back then, but he put a towel of a servant around his waist. He put the towel of a slave around his waist. And he went about serving his best friends. He literally stripped himself of all comfort, his dignity, his honor, his position, his authority, his rank at the top of the ladder, and he knelt down in front of his best friends, got a bowl filled with water, unstrapped their sandals, see, this is like an unbelievable scene. And it is so unbelievable that this guy Peter, who's part of the inner circle, is watching what's happening here. And he knows it is so literally unbelievable when he sees Jesus do what he does with his robes, look at what it says here. Look at what Jesus did. Okay, let's keep reading. And he poured water into a basin, and then he began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel he had around them. I mean, see, he's down on his hands and knees, and there was this towel that servants used to wear in those days. I mean, just think of the au pairs and the people that sort of serve us in our world. Well, they had like a very typical towel back then that they used to wear around their waist. The slaves did. The servants did. And Jesus put one of them on. After he took his own garments off, he gets down on his knees and he starts washing their feet. And when he gets done, he dries their feet with his towel. This is an incredible scene. I mean, let's not be literal with this, but let's kind of be, figurative. How many of you in here work, you're not the boss where it is you work? How many of that would be true of you? You're not the boss where you work. Okay, good. I mean, stop and think about this. Can you imagine your boss who's supposed to be above you, maybe even way up in the top of the ladder in the corporate environment that you're around, lowering themselves of the position and the dignity that they have all their life clamored and climbed after? And I don't know what it would be for you, for your boss, but then to serve you in the lowliest manner possible. I mean, can you imagine that? That's what's going on here. This is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. This is the person who spoke the universe into existence. And then our hero Peter, look at it here. Look what happens. When Jesus finally came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, why are you going to wash my feet?" Let's stop right there. Now, this is where I wish we really had like instant replay, or what's that one TV show called, Real TV or whatever it's called, Real Live TV or whatever, to show us the tone. Because, I mean, Peter just got done watching him wash 5 or 6 of his friends' feet. And now he's saying, "You're not going to wash my feet. I mean, don't even think you're going to do that. No way, Jose, You can wash my feet." You see, Peter has a problem. It's the same problem you and I have. It's the problem we have with the serving king. I mean, if we really stop to think about it, we have a problem with the serving king. We want a powerful leader, a powerful king. The idea of a king stooping down and washing smelly feet is repulsive. You see, in our culture, here in the 21st century, we have this idea that you work your way up the ladder to attain. Everybody exists to serve you. That's what it's all about. But Jesus, basically, through this example here, he's turning everything upside down. He says, that's the way the world's living is all about. That's not the way my life is. I didn't come to be served. I know I'm the King of Kings and Lord of Lords, but I didn't come to be served. I came to serve. And Peter had a problem with this. In fact, look at what's going on, the dialogue between Peter and Jesus. Look what keeps happening. When he came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, why are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't understand now why I'm doing it, but someday you will." "No," Peter protested, "you're never washing my feet." Jesus replied, "But if I don't wash you, you won't belong to me." It's as if Jesus is trying to say, Peter, you got to hear me on this one. I am the servant king. It's as if Jesus is saying to us here today, here at this service hour, Calvary Church, Newport Mesa, 21st, Jesus, he's trying to say to us, you got to get this one, gang. You got to hear me on this one. I am the king of a kingdom that's built on the whole entire concept, the whole entire idea of serving. And if you're not into serving, then I'm the wrong leader for you. And no matter how much you walk around saying, oh, I believe in you, Jesus, if you're not willing to serve all people, all types, all times, you know, you really don't belong to me. That's what he's saying to Peter and what he's saying to us this morning. So Peter says to Jesus, after Jesus says to him this, look at what Peter said. Simon Peter exclaimed, then wash my hands and head as well, Lord, not just my feet. Just go for it, Jesus. Give me a bath. Now, that's what Peter usually did. Peter usually thought with his mouth instead of his brain, okay? Which is what you and I usually do, by the way. And then look at what happens. These are the very words of Jesus, okay? These come right from his lips, not mine. Look what he says there. After washing their feet, he put his robe on again. Now, you got to understand what's going on here. See, he's had this garment of the servant on. He finally took it off, put his own clothes back on, and then he sat down, and look what it says there. He asked them, do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right because it's true. And since I, the Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Circle those words. Example to follow. And then the next phrase that comes out of Jesus' mouth is, do as I have done to you. The key word there is do. Do as I have done to you. How true it is that a servant is not greater than the master, nor are the messengers more important than the ones who sends them. Just stop right there. See, Peter viewed authority like you and I view authority, as power-driven. It's all about the org chart. Who's at the top? And if I get to the top, then I don't have to touch smelly feet, dirty lies, messed up situations. Jesus leveled the playing field, and Jesus is saying here to you, to me, you know what? If you're going to be calling yourself one of mine, then your whole job, the full extent of your job here on this earth is to serve humanity. And then look at the last sentence of his words there. He says, you know these things, now do them. Don't just talk about doing them, do them. No lip service allowed in my kingdom. Don't just promise to do these things, really do these things. Serve other people when they have needs. Now, it's interesting to me that Peter here is expressing being extremely uncomfortable with Jesus washing his feet. But why? Why was Jesus washing their feet in the first place? And you know what? This is very intriguing to me. I don't know if you realize this, and so I know that so many of you here are sort of new to Christianity or new to the Bible, and I thank you so much for being here, because that's what our church is for you. We want you to learn and process and grow. But what's really interesting in Luke chapter 22, which is a parallel account of what's going on here in John 13, and so you understand what a parallel account is? It's sort of like another writer's perspective, who was actually there at the time, writing about what took place. Well, John wrote about what was taking place, but so was this guy named Luke. And so in Luke chapter 22, we have sort of an inside look at why Jesus actually did what he was doing in the first place. And just so you understand why Jesus was doing this, see, in Luke chapter 22, we know that at this some of you have heard it called the Last Supper. Well, we know that at that Last Supper, communion was shared, okay? And Jesus, you got to understand, Jesus just got done sharing with his followers that he was going to shed his blood. He just got done sharing with his followers that he was going to die a horrible death. He just got done breaking the bread and saying, this is my body, take it and eat. He just got done saying, this cup represents my blood, take and drink. He just got done doing that. Just got done. And in Luke chapter 22, look at what his followers did right after he did that. Look at this. Luke chapter 22 in your outline. A dispute broke out among them about who was the greatest. They're fighting among themselves. Jesus just says, hey, I'm going to die. I'm checking out. They all start going, hey, Jesus, well, who's great here? Like, who's Who's taking over is it me? Peter, is it me? James goes, is it me? John goes, is it me? And they're all fighting with each other. And while they're fighting with each other about who's the most important, the most significant, the top kahuna now, Jesus, they're all fighting. You can try to picture this picture. They're all fighting. And Jesus sort of walks over to the guy in the room who's supposed to be the slave, because every meal had one in those days. And he says to the guy, hey, you can have the night off. But before you go, could you give me your servant's towel? And the guy leaves the room. He gives him the towel. He takes his clothes off, puts the servant's towel on. And meanwhile, they're over here still fighting. And he puts a towel on, goes over, takes a bowl, takes a pitcher of water. They're all still fighting in this big, hubbub over here. Puts the bowl on the floor in front of one of them while they're fighting. Takes one of their feet, sticks it in the bowl after taking the sandal off, and absolute quiet comes across the room. All around him, there's this shouting going, is it me? Is it me? Is it me? And in the chaos of the moment, he strips off his garment, walks over, starts washing their feet right in the midst of their fighting. You talk about a picture of greatness. From God's perspective, he starts washing their feet. What a picture. You see, the conventional wisdom of our day says, it's my rights, and I can do what I want to do. And anybody I have to walk across to get where I want to go, that's what happens. Now, we would never say it that strong, but that's sort of in the back of our minds. Jesus says, well, that's the conventional wisdom of this world. But the unconventional wisdom of my world is, well, everybody's clamoring, how do I get to the top? I want you to put on the servant's garment and ask, how can I serve you? And not just those that it's easy to serve, but, like the person that cuts you off in traffic, and you want to, give them some sort of physical display. Or you're in the grocery store and you're walking up to that line that says 10 items or less, and you're counting the cart of the person in front of you and they have 11. And inside, increasingly, you're getting irritated. Or somebody at work who in your mind you don't believe should get the promotion, but they got what you thought you should have got. And now they're over you. Or your kids all day long have been pushing it to the limits and never once for all the time of their existence on this earth, except for Mother's Day or Father's Day, have ever said thank you. And yet again, for another instance, for the 52nd time that day, you still need to serve. But inside, you're getting increasingly bitter because you don't want to. In those instances, Jesus is saying, serve. Now, what I want to do is wrap up this message with 3 garments that you and I need to strip off if we're going to serve other people. 3 garments, okay? And I'll run through these very quickly. The first garment that we need to strip off if in our 21st century world we're going to be a servant, the first garment we need to strip off is the optional garment. The optional garment. Now, the optional garment, the excuse for the optional garment is, well, I'll tell you what, I'll serve, no problem. But I'll have to see first if it fits in my schedule. If I can sort of eke out some time, I'll do it. If it's convenient, no problem. Jesus is saying, this isn't optional. I'll demonstrate this by washing your feet. now you get out there and do it. He's commanding me to serve other people. He doesn't say, most of you can serve when you want to serve. No, he says, you know these things, now do them. See, the whole point of this passage, if we write this down, the point is service is required. It's required. It's required. Write this down. Service is not an optional thing. It's not an optional thing. You're supposed to do it. There's a true story. This is an incredible story about a race that took place in the Special Olympics. Some of you have heard of these, and some of you have actually seen them. The Special Olympics. It was held in Seattle, Washington. Happened a few years ago. Some of you might even saw the news report when it was recast. There were 9 young children who took part in this 100-yard dash or 100-yard race. These 9 children were either mentally or physically disadvantaged or challenged in some way. The gun went off, and off they went out of the starting blocks. Not so much in a dash, but sort of with physical earnestness. And they were heading, all of them, toward the finish line when all of a sudden one of them, a little boy, tripped and then violently tumbled onto the track. And he started crying. I mean, he started wailing. And the other kids who were all running down the track, they didn't see the boy trip, but they heard the boy crying. And so they all slowed down, and then they all stopped, saw him crying, and actually all 8 of them walked back to help this little boy. And one little girl with Down syndrome actually got down on her hands and knees. If you've seen this, you'll remember it. She got down on her hands and knees, and she kissed the little boy and said, now that'll make it better. And they all helped the boy. All 8 of the kids helped this boy get back up to his feet. And they all locked arms like that. And all 9 of them walked across the finish line together. And the whole place, if you've seen it, you remember the whole place just erupted. I mean, just standing ovation. And in fact, they still talk about this event to that day. Now, see, those kids realize what us as human adults don't. That life is too short to race through it. Speeding to see who can be first, without ever stopping to notice that there's people around you who have needs. I mean, just stop right now. Just stop. Close your eyes. Think about Monday. Think about Tuesday. Think about Wednesday. Think about Thursday, Friday. Was there anybody in Monday that you raced by that you knew could have used your help, maybe at work or at home or a friend, a family member? How about Tuesday, Wednesday? You just kept going by. You knew you should have stopped. You knew you should have assisted. You knew you should have cared, but it would have just been too much trouble. See, the point I'm just trying to get across is it is work to slow down to serve. It is work to put our own goals on the shelf so that we can help others achieve their goals. Most of us here are racing in life so fast, we'll never hear the cries of people because we're too busy running on ahead to carve out our niche. Jesus said, no! Life is an opportunity to serve, even if it means losing the race. Second garment to strip off is the merit garment. And the merit garment. The merit garment says things like, well, I'll serve them. Okay, I'll walk out of this room today and I'll serve people, Tim, but I'm going to serve people who deserve it. Jesus says, no. You serve whether people deserve it or not. See, the whole issue here, what if you're like me, you kind of say, well, I've been doing this now for 4 weeks and nobody has thanked me yet. I'm not doing it a 5th. Or, that person, they don't deserve it. The whole point here, just write it down. The point is, I must serve people whether they deserve it or not. See, the merit mindset says if they deserve it, I'll serve them. The grace mindset says I'll serve them, whether they deserve it or not. And a lot of you say, well, it's really hard for me to serve people who don't deserve it. Well, let me tell you something. God served you, and you didn't deserve it. He served you by sending His Son, Jesus Christ, to come down to this earth to die for you. I think we can serve. Number 3, the last one, and this is the hardest one for me, is to strip off the applause garment. To strip off the applause garment. Sometimes, I don't know, I find myself doing things because I know that I'll get noticed. How many of you in here have ever done anything? Let's just be completely honest, strip off all pretensions here this morning. How many of you in here have ever done something because you knew somebody was going to say, attaboy, attagirl? Can I see the show of hands? Yeah. And see, what Jesus is saying here is you got to strip that one off. Because no one may ever say, way to go. No one may ever say, great job. No one might ever say, thank you. No one might ever go, we like getting pats on the back. We like getting applause, physical or verbal. In fact, I'll just give you this point here. The point is this. The point is, you know you're a real servant, and this is really crucial here this morning. You know you're a servant when you act like one, even when you're being treated like one. I think you get my point there. You can tell you're a real servant when you act like one, even when you're being treated like one. See, we sort of like to serve because we know people will say, attaboy, attagirl, thank you for coming today. We really appreciate your presence with us. But what if somebody says, here, go do this, in sort of a harsh tone? And then they sort of have that attitude like, you owe this to me, to us, to this organization. And in your mind you're going, this is the last time I'll ever do this. Jesus is saying, no, this is a great time now for you to really be a servant. Because now it's an opportunity for you to act like one because you're actually being treated like one. When somebody's going, attaboy, attagirl, thank you, way to go, it's easy. But when somebody's kicking dirt in your face or piling on more responsibilities, and you say, thank you. I'm so excited to do this. And I will do it with all my effort. You see, it's at that point, gang, you're a true servant. Because you're acting like one even when you're being treated like one. Somebody asked me this question. It's on your outline, and I thought I'd put it down there because it's something I've been wrestling with over the last couple of months. Somebody asked me this question a couple of months ago, and the question is this. Could I live without applause? Could I live without applause? Or you can put in there anything you want. Could I live without the attaboys or attagirls or way to goes or thank yous? You see, when we walk out those doors here today, we will have an opportunity to serve. Not just those we like to serve, not just when it's convenient to serve, not just when it's comfortable to serve, but some of us are going to walk out those doors. We are going to wear the lapel pin, the badge, the banner of I am Jesus's. I'm a Christian. Well, guess what? When you walk out those doors, Jesus says, follow my example. Now go serve. Have fun. Let's pray. God, thanks for this message, and you've taught me a lot. I realize I've had some time to wrestle through this, and many of us here are hearing it for the first time. I pray, God, that as we process it, as we gnaw on it, as we wrestle through it, we would give ourselves to really serving. Not just like when it's easy, when we get the thank yous, when people deserve it. But God, help us do it even when we don't want to do it, even when we don't want to do it for somebody, and even when they don't deserve it. God, just thank you that we get the opportunity to hear stuff like this because we get to see that life together, lived in this world, it's a little different than life in ours. But I have to believe, God, if we lived life together, all of us just in this room here this morning, if we really went around serving those we come in contact with, serving those in this church, people would see a difference in us that isn't normally seen in our world. That's my prayer for the people in this room, that people will see your son Jesus in us. It's in his name I pray right now. Amen.